StreamYard's like, do it now.
And we are doing it now. We are talking about the biggest film of the year. If you're talking about losing money, I don't know. Megalopolis. Now, here's the thing. This is a movie that is known mostly for how poorly it's been received by a trailer that had a bunch of fake movie critic quotes promoting it, and now by its spectacular box office collapse. Francis Ford Coppola, legendary esteemed director, Godfather, Apocalypse Now, amongst other things, sunk $120 million, as reported, of his own money into this movie. And then there's also whatever Lionsgate kicked in, I guess, for P&R, however that works. Opening weekend made $4 million. Now, a lot of people would love to make $4 million, including, I think, everyone on this panel. But when you think about how much it costs to get the thing out in the world, it's not such a pretty story. But the question is, does Megalopolis, not Mechalopolis, I'd watch that movie too. Does it deserve the kind of the score in this getting, the derision, or does it deserve the praise? Because this movie does have its fans, at least one of which is on this panel. So tonight we're going to talk about Megalopolis with Sergio Akanaika, New York City indie filmmaker, as it says right there in his title. Also, Mark the Movie Man Krawcheck of Special Mark Productions and the Spoiler Room podcast. So welcome, gentlemen. It is a smaller collection of Earth's Mightiest critics because many of the other EMC are out right now watching a preview screening of Joker, the film that we'll be talking about next week this time. So I feel like we got the better end of the deal.
Yeah, this is
sorry, Mark. Yeah, Mark, I should have asked you to cover your ears as the DC show, but
no. The Joker and Joker 2 are in their own category. I mean, like I said in my review, when the Joker first came out, I'm like, yeah, this was a great movie when it was Taxi Driver and the King of Comedy. It's one of those things where I wasn't slamming anyone who really loved the film. Mad props to him. I'm like, go back to 1976 then and watch this film and tell me just how similar it is. So here it sounds like I've been trying to avoid reviews for Joker 2 till I see it, which will probably be this weekend. But I've been trying to avoid the spoilers for it because I want to kind of just catch it on my own. But just the little glimpses I've seen, they tried to do something different and original versus, copying another movie. And it sounds like it's not being received well. So, but Megalopolis isn't received well, but I don't know how much of that is the bad press it got before the film came out.
Well, I think it's got a very strange trailer, a very kind of hard to explain in an elevator pitch concept, and there's all this kind of baked in negative publicity. But Mark, to your point, I think it does recall other movies that have not been successful, but find their audience. And talking about flashing back to 1976. There were a number of times, particularly towards the end, when I was getting serious, like Brian De Palma vibes with some of the trippy montages and stuff going on, but in a way that I feel like he wishes that he had this technology to pull some of these trippy, head sequences off back in the day. So I think this movie is a triumph on a lot of levels. I don't really see what the problem is. And I don't quite understand all the criticisms. Maybe you guys can help me out with this. But unless you're sitting there with a closed mind and crossed arms, I feel like there's a lot to invite people in, a lot to think about. And I'm excited to talk about this movie. And I was kind of dreading some of the other opinions here. But Sergio, what did you make of Megalopolis?
Well, my official rating is 3 out of 5 Megalon buildings. Because this is about the money issue. It's a non-issue. Hollywood numbers are not really accurate. It's mostly used for promo because it doesn't really matter how much money a movie makes on the opening weekend. They're going to track this for a year, 2, 5 years, 10 years, as far as monetization goes. Eventually, it'll make all the money back, or Coppola will declare it as a failed business venture and try to get some money back through taxes, etc. He has plenty of money. I mean, he sold a vineyard, I believe, for about $600 million, and he used under 200 million for this project, and he had to put in 20 million for distribution. This is being done in a super indie way where he's hired the distribution company to take it out. So the money issue, it's nonsense. As far as the movie goes, I think,
hold on a second. We got to pull over there. It's
Sure.
not nonsense because someone is losing a ton of money here.
Coppola.
Whether that's
Coppola.
and that's I think there's something to be said for that, right? I mean, that's
Yeah.
I don't care if you have $600 million from a winery that you sold. It even the expectation, I think, on some level, he's putting this out because he sunk a fortune into this thing and he wanted to get out in front of people because I think he was hoping to evoke a response. This is a very weird but positive, uplifting kind of a movie. I felt like he was trying to put something out to entertain and enlighten or enliven people, and to see this kind of a non-response from the viewing public, it's got to hurt, even not just in the wallet but kind of in the heart. But I'm sorry I interrupted you. What about your reaction to the film itself?
Yeah. So eventually Coppola will be fine. The movie will probably make the money back. So the movie itself, it's kind of like an outsider movie outside the spectrum of good bad that we see with mainstream movies. Like, for example, Saving Private Ryan would be a good movie in that spectrum, right? And a lot of people would agree with this. Then we have people like Andy Warhol. We have Pool Man movie, Chris Pine. We have some Godard movies would also, fit into this. Auteurs who make weird movies that are in their form not similar to mainstream movies. So this is one of those movies, and I thought it was boring at times. It was very interesting at times, a very unique thing. And it could only be judged against itself and, maybe some of the goals it had for itself. So for people who can get with the Megalon, get on the Megalon, wavelength, I think they'll dig it. It's got some interesting ideas, some interesting visuals, some interesting callbacks to actual history. Crassus is a real person. John Voight's character was a real person. And Julia Cicero, obviously, and a bunch of other people. So, I thought it was, a weird outsider movie, kind of like a Godard movie. Good. I mean, I thought it was good. I thought by its own standards, it's good.
Yeah, I mean, 3 out of 5 is quite the rating. I'll be curious to find out about some of those boring parts you mentioned because I can definitely understand. I just don't know. Yeah, I might track with you on that. But Mark, how about you? Mark the Mecha Man.
Mecha Man. I give it 3.5 out of 5. It is, it is a pretentious art piece. You can tell that it is all Coppola putting his thing in here, but just because it might come off or feel pretentious doesn't mean it's not entertaining. I found a lot of interesting things going on in this film, interesting concepts, performances, this world he built, this kind of, alternate universe of if the Roman Empire didn't exactly die or was reincarnated into New York, in this case, New Rome, and I dug that amalgamation of stuff, the Colosseum, you had, the high rise stuff in here, the fact that you have this underlying theme of, art versus commerce, basically between Adam Driver's character and Esposito's character.
One quick interruption. Yeah. One of the problems, and we can get back to this later, I had was there really a conflict between what the two sides wanted to do? I mean, both sides want to improve the city, and
right.
It wasn't clearly spelled out how using Megalon would take away billions from the city, blah, blah, blah.
Well, it wasn't so much using Megalon, it was the fact that he was leveling chunks of the city for his versus putting it towards revitalizing the city. So I think you've also got the conflict not only of art versus commerce, but old versus new, which is definitely in here. The old way of doing things versus the new way of doing things. I kind of likened this film to which if Terrence Malick, David Lynch, Zack Snyder all got into the same room, dropped some acid and wrote a script and said, here you go. You kind of have that here because of, you've got that feeling here, the atmosphere, but I dug it quite a bit. I think this would fit very well with Cronenberg's film that Ian and I discussed a while back with Cosmopolis. I know, not just because it ends Opolis, but the way the atmosphere for that film was as well. It's an odd film, and I think with Megalopolis, I would say if Coppola's name isn't attached to this, I think it gets received differently. For one, I honestly think part of it is if you put take Coppola's name off, maybe not use Adam Driver, maybe a slightly lesser known name in here. I think this film actually does better. I think it's just the sheer fact of you have Coppola on here and what that expectation is that you get something completely different from that director, and it throws a lot of people off. To begin with, and it's a bizarre movie on its own, so it's kind of, double hit for the mainstream audience.
Yeah, it's
But
not.
I wonder.
It's not The Godfather.
No,
it's not. Although there are similar, themes with the family struggles and that kind of treachery and interplay between families. But no, Mark, you bring up an interesting question. I don't know if Coppola hadn't been attached. I don't know if you get half the people that are in this movie, because I mean it's a very eclectic kind of all-star cast, and maybe that's a good thing. Maybe if you populate this with a bunch of unknowns, you get some really interesting performances. I mean, that's not to say that anybody, I think, phones it in. I think they're all doing a very good job. I like the way they were directed. I like the way a lot of people were written. The Cesar character played by Adam Driver, it's weird because this movie is labeled a fable. It's Megalopolis, a fable. And aside from some very explicit, New York 9/11 imagery and some other contemporary tragedies towards the end, it is very much, I mean, you can tell it's set in a version of New York, but it is kind of like out of time and place. I think there was some title card talking about this was like the 2300s or something like that, or the 3rd century of the 21st. I don't know. But they don't quite explain how all this Roman influence made it into this contemporary film. It is a fable, minus these real world examples from our reality, which I understand what Coppola was going for, but I think it's kind of a mistake. You just take those 2 bits out of there, and it's a complete fantasy, right? But I dug it. I liked the allegory, and I kept having to turn my brain off, thinking, okay, is Adam Driver playing Elon Musk? Is Giancarlo Esposito playing Eric Adams? Which is weird to see this movie 3 days after the real Black Mayor of New York is being embroiled in scandal. Trying to take those contemporary allegories out of your head and just look at it on its own terms. That's why I think I need to see this movie again, because I know that, or at least I feel that Coppola isn't so much trying to make statements about certain real life people. I think he's taking the world as he sees it and how it's being kind of disintegrated before our very eyes with pop culture and money and corrupt politics, and just kind of feeding it back to us. It's almost like you mentioned a bunch of great filmmakers there, Mark, but I would say this is almost like the Hunger Games if it was all about the capital and not the people who are fighting for the food. And I think that's it's a fascinating place to go. I think it looks beautiful. I think a lot of the special effects and the sets are pretty gorgeous. There's the famous shot of Adam Driver, and oh my gosh, I know this actress has been a bunch of things, but I don't think I've seen her like perform, but Natalie Emmanuel, I know she was in like Game of Thrones and some other things, but they do this bit where they're on top of this like high rise and they're dancing across girders, and it's beautiful. This movie is very romantic, it's very poetic, but it's also very harsh and kind of violent and grim. And I appreciated that sensibility. I mean, we get a bona fide, happy, optimistic ending, which, for a dystopian kind of nightmare drama, you're not expecting that. And I really like the optimism at the end. I'm a sucker for optimism. I'm also a sucker for watching a movie that has its own distinct voice that I can pay to go see in a Cineplex. I don't feel like I've been ripped off. This has been a lousy summer/early fall for me, and we've talked about a lot of it on this live stream. But I came out of Megalopolis feeling like I love this movie. I don't know if it's great yet because I gotta kind of absorb it a bit more, but I felt like I had seen something that I would have missed out if I just watched this, on my phone or my laptop.
About Mark saying it's like Lynch. Yeah, Lynch is a good his regular movies, not his TV shows or Great Story, but his regular movies that he used to make is a good example of what I think this movie is. This is like Coppola being his Lynch, super creative, off the studio system, doing his thing, right? Now, there is an example of this kind of thing being done super realistically, which is Battlestar Galactica. They took ancient Greek gods, ancient Greek society and themes, and they merged that with modern world, and then they had a adventure story, basically a sci-fi adventure story. So it can be done. It's just the way that he, Coppola did it. This is more like a philosopher thinking back about things, and it's more like, I mean, this is why I say it's kind of like Goodbye to Language, which I don't know if Mark saw it, but Ian saw it and didn't like it, and he didn't like it. But it's more like Coppola's got a bunch of ideas about the present, future, how things can go, and he's going to flesh them out. Sometimes using play type speech, sometimes using amazing visuals, sometimes using live action. So it's a very unique movie of its own. Eventually, it may become popular with lots of people.
Oh, this has I don't like throwing the word around because it gets thrown around so much, but I think this is legitimate, one of those cult type films that is going to be talked about and discussed in certain circles for many years after your big popcorn films that have come out this year have faded into the dollar bin,
Right.
Because it's so unique. Even some of those most despised or low rated films are still being talked about today versus your Academy Award winning film. I barely see anybody talking about The English Patient at all, but I still see people talking about The Last Starfighter. They've been talking about The Last Starfighter forever, or Battle Beyond the Stars, or they come out, and it's not just in my circles, it just comes up in random conversation. Someone discovers this film and they're like, have you seen this film? And I'm like, yeah, I got it on my shelf 3 times. Come on,
And well, also the movie deals with eternal problems. So the reason that it resonates now is these kind of problems with civilizations changing has happened going back all the way to the Romans. The Romans themselves were like, should we give the vote to these new immigrants, or should it be retained just for the Republican class? Blah blah blah. Right? All that kind of the conservative push against the modern, the instinct to try to make drastic changes has always been there. So this is why it resonates. So it's sort of a epic story.
Yeah, very much so. One thing I want to circle back to you on with Mark is my fear is that yes, it could be appreciated as a kind of a cult classic in years to come. It could also be the hey, Megalopolis is playing as the midnight movie. Let's go throw popcorn at it and laugh.
It could become that easily too. Yeah,
which is weird because I can understand being in a theater where people are kind of mocking it and deriding it, but I can't imagine like going and sitting down and watching it, with anything but kind of pure intentions and not getting caught up in at least some of the ideas that Coppola is trying to get across. Because Sujiro, you're right. I mean, there's the whole issue of Adam Driver's character wants to build this kind of a new, utopic city, but he wants to build it sort of on top of the dying remnants of modern day New Rome, or at least part of it. And he's getting some resistance from the mayor, who's sort of this man of the people. Then you've got Shia LaBeouf playing Caesar's debauched cousin. He's very good, but he's playing all these different angles because he's jealous and he wants power and he wants the respect of the elders in his family. He's just not getting it because he's kind of a deviant screw up. You've got Aubrey Plaza playing a TV personality, a new
Wow Platinum. Audrey Plaza is Wow Platinum.
Wow Platinum. Yes. And even that, it's not spelled out, in three underscores of lipstick, but she is a media figure. She's a kind of an entertainment journalist who is sleeping with every powerful person that she can in order to, keep advancing her career. And towards the end of the movie, she makes, some power plays that don't end up so well. Spoiler alert. But you're talking about the collusion of media and political power to destroy people, whether they deserve it or not. You're talking about a guy who really wants to build something and make something that will help people, and other people want to tear him down for it. There's a great kind of one of the many subplots in this movie involving a pop star who's this kind of Taylor Swift, young virginal, singer. Her whole thing is, staying pure. That's not so much Taylor Swift, but I got those kind of vibes from this.
Well, yeah, no, it's just pop star. Right? It was an amalgamation of your top pop star, young teen pop stars.
But she gets embroiled live on TV from the Coliseum. Shia LaBeouf's character puts up a video of her sleeping with Adam Driver's character and saying, telling the world, hey, she's not really that, she's not that innocent, to quote a Britney Spears song. But guess what? Turns out it was a deep fake. It was not real. It was a staged video, and it just kind of again underscores a lot of what Coppola is trying to get across here, which is society as he sees it, the world has kind of gone off the rails, and we need to kind of stop, think back to what is really important in life, helping people, loving people, family, and try and bring ourselves back from what he sees it looks like from based on this movie as the brink. And that it ends on that last note. There's a little baby, the son of Caesar, who stops time. I still don't quite understand what the time stopping thing is about, guys. Help me out on that one.
Yeah, I think it was not used properly as a plot device. I mean, it's a skill that the main character has. It could have easily been used, I mean, as a good plot device. Like when the Soviet satellite falls, he could have stopped time, used Megalon to reinforce the city, save the city. Now, then everyone gets on board with Megalon.
Yeah, but again, I think that would have been more of a traditional, something you'd see in a regular mainstream movie. And the fact that he didn't do it, it's a head scratcher to me, because I'm thinking, all right, if you took out that time stopping device, you would have lost some of the kind of visual poetry in some of these sequences, but you wouldn't have lost anything plot wise. I don't think it added anything, or if it did, I missed it. So Mark, did you see anything as far as the significance of Caesar, our architect / scientist, being able to stop time pretty much whenever he wants, except when he loses the ability, like the Crow, for some reason?
Outside of making a lake out of a puddle, I think it might have been alluding to, because he's an artist, even though he's an architect. And when you create something in art, say a statue, you've stopped time, that you've captured a frame of time, a moment in time for that. And usually with the stop time stuff is when he's dealing with his architectural thoughts, with his artistic thoughts, usually, how things are going to look. And he rewinds things, or looking at it from a different angle, possibly. I almost thought at first it was just him in his own mind stopping time, until Julia saw it when he smashed the building, that I was like, oh, that's a real thing. But it could also allude to the fact that she is a creative as well. And so she could see the same vision he has, and no one else actually sees the time stopping thing. And he loses his ability to stop time until he meets her, because there's a moment, I forgot the moment where he loses it, but I think after he goes on a bender or whatnot, when he gets, that's what it was, when he got embarrassed because everybody thinks he's a pedo, which he's not, because the pop star lied about her age and she's actually 23. And there's some allegory and some statements in there about popularity. But it's hard to say because no one else seems to, for good reasons, notice that he can do this with time except her. So whether or not it's an actual thing of time, or it's that they're both on the same creative wavelength and the way they're perceiving the world, they can see the alternatives and options. And that's what the angle is with this time. So they can see this action going forward, that's not going to quite work. Reverse, what if we go this direction with it? So I almost caught it as that, as like it's there within their mind of how things are, and that it's not an actual ability, but it's hard to say. And I think it's open to interpretation. But
it is, and I feel like we're close perhaps to figuring this out, because the first time we see it is the opening scene of the film where he's about to kind of throw himself off of this giant, like, kind of Empire State Building, but he pulls himself back on the brink. The second time we see it, if I remember correctly, there are other people around, but nobody kind of comments on it. They're demolishing a building, and he says stop. And then that's when Julia, I think she's driving by or something, and she sees it. And then when she confronts him in his office a little while later, she's like, yeah, I saw you, stop time or do that thing at the demolition. And he was kind of surprised by it. So I am wondering if maybe in this sort of not so deftly handled way, or, hey, I'm going to hint at this, but leave it open to interpretation way, he's saying that these two kind of creative people, as you mentioned, find each other, and they are sort of an oasis for each other to pull back, to stop from this rushing, crazy world that they find themselves embroiled in, because everything is constantly moving. It's scandal, it's creativity, it's scandal about the creativity, it's sex, it's money, it's power and fame. But when they kind of get together, there are very few quiet moments in the movie, and they often involve these two characters. So I think there is something there. I just don't know either if Coppola didn't nail it, or if I'm overthinking it, or we're both overthinking it, or what.
I think Sajua is right that it's handled clumsily, but this isn't material. This isn't something we're used to seeing Coppola handle. Something as fanciful as this. I mean, he's not known for doing fantastical things like this film. So it's him trying something new as well. And I think a little more experienced with this type of material, maybe it could be handled a little more refined. But yeah, you're right. We're close to what I think he's alluding to. I'm with Sajiwa. He just doesn't handle it too well, and it comes off a little more as a gimmick. And at least it doesn't happen too many times to where you're just like, oh, look, he's reversing time again.
In the movie, I think it's supposed to be a real ability that he has,
right,
that the other character notices. It's just plot-wise and character-wise, it just, it could be another story. Maybe there's stuff that was taken out. Maybe him being able to be able to stop time is to be like a god, right? So it's like being Superman.
Right.
It's going to be very difficult to put that kind of a character in trouble.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm taking a moment to look at some of other Coppola's films, because Mark, you said we haven't quite been in this territory with him before. I was reminded recently he did do Francis Ford Coppola's Bram Stoker's Dracula.
Okay.
Which, I mean, those characters demonstrated the ability to stop time for 2.5 hours, because man. Anyway, sorry.
This is the first time he's done anything this outside the mainstream.
Yeah.
Close to David Lynch type territory.
Yeah, and I'm there for it. I would hope that, maybe this outing especially the reaction that he's getting. I hope it doesn't discourage him, because I like this idea of a guy who's given us legendary, kind of Academy Award winning, historically significant motion pictures. Just as he's getting older, kind of rediscovering or discovering new things about the craft, and kind of playing the young man's game. I kept thinking about this watching the movie. It's so bonkers and batshit and beautifully realized that this feels like it was made by, a 23-year-old filmmaker that just came into a lot of studio money. It feels vibrant and new and challenging in ways that I don't expect like an 80-plus-year-old, guy to be more like set in his ways and kind of complaining about things. He's not complaining about stuff. I think he's analyzing what he sees as a problem and offering the audience a hopeful solution, or at least hope that there is a solution, which, it's great.
I think he started writing this in his 40s, so
So he's been
that might have
he's
some
been living with this. So he's been living with this for, my gosh, was like 3-4 decades now.
right.
That's pretty impressive.
So that's maybe why it feels like a younger person's type of story, because this is taking something really that's when he was a younger person. This is some of the ideas that he was into.
Sure, but I think like even just in terms of the filmmaking, like I mentioned, there's a lot of CGI in here, and a lot of practical effects and sets. I think the one thing that was like really distracting was there's a character towards the very end who gets an arrow through the chest. I'm like, now that I'm reminded of The Walking Dead right now, and that's not a flattering comparison. But I'm saying that these new tools that weren't around, 40 years ago when he was coming up with this script, he's really assembled, I think, a talented team, and he has a keen enough eye to really pull it off.
Well, the special effects I mentioned in my review go from meh to magnificent in this film. There are a few, where you could definitely tell they're little CGI little people when he's trying to do a crowd, namely near the end when he's giving his speech, when Driver's character, when Cesar is giving his speech up there. That part maybe could have used a little work. It's okay. But I mean, but again, with a film on the scope that this is, those moments are okay, because then you get what we saw parts of it in the trailer, and seeing it realized in the film actually looked far better than I thought it was going to, is when Driver's driving in when Caesar's driving in his car and he's looking at, you see the statues move and they're falling, as he sees the city falling apart and culture falling apart, and the way those statues looked, those looked fantastic. They look far better than I thought they were going to when I saw the trailer. And I'm like, those were some impressive visuals because they're so huge. And and that's the thing, is the scope of everything on here. And I'm wondering what is sitting on the cutting room floor, because I would have thought there maybe would have been a little bit more with the Russian satellite after it came down, but we get more of a kind of a montage type thing with that, and what got me was how people were rejecting what Cesar was coming up with, though Cesar was in his end looking at providing something for everyone, regardless of what Claudio, played by Shia LaBeouf, his character is saying about Cesar. Cesar, yeah, he was rich, but he was actually trying to create this utopia, because they use that word a number of times, for everyone. And we see at the end, he's letting the gates open for everyone to live in the new Central Park, basically, which has got, this organic buildings to it. And so it's just interesting to see about the different perspectives of presented and what people see versus who they really are. I was impressed, and I tell you, I was waiting for it, and I'd love to hear your guys' thought if you're waiting for it. I was waiting for the turn for Cesar. I was waiting for
a heel turn.
A heel turn. I was waiting for Cesar to take that turn to where that's it, screw my plans, whatever, just the old destroy the models and just, I give up on this, and then use his powers a little bit for hate until Julia comes up and goes, no, honey, calm down. But we don't get that with him. we get him confused at what has happened to him at one point, a very dramatic thing, which Megalon is used later to as well to help him. And you get him confused. He's not like looking to be vindictive necessarily. He's like, why?
Well, and I think, Mark, again, kind of like what I said to Sujiwa, there are certain plot threads in this movie that go against what you would see in the regular Hollywood blockbuster version of that. There would be a heel turn, or at least a flirting with darkness. Whereas we come to realize, and I think this is one of the brilliant things about the movie is our perception of Caesar when he comes in and he kind of disrupts Mayor Cicero's kind of like presentation. I can't remember what it was, almost like a ribbon cutting or something.
Yeah, it was for a casino because he was basically
that's right, the
raising
casino.
a casino. Yeah,
right. And he comes in and he starts quoting Shakespeare and talking all this pomp and circumstance. Like, I don't know if I quite like this guy. Plus, he was about to throw himself off a building. What's up with this character? And so it's easy to kind of buy into what the people in the movie are trying to tell us about Caesar. But then you realize he is actually kind of a broken, tragic guy who's expressing himself through his art and his inventions. And he's got a dead wife who was with child, and that's the kind of the great tragedy of his life, because he never loved anybody after that. And I think he went headlong into the work of continuing to try and help people, even though it may have been an obsession that led to the events that led to his wife dying in that car or running off that bridge. But when Julia enters the picture and she saves him, it is an old-fashioned kind of a classic love story, and it's all about the the next generation. It's not cynical in a way that a lot of these kind of big Hollywood movies are. I mean, there's bona fide romance and dancing and kissing in this movie. I mean, they don't do any of that annoying stuff where two characters really love each other, put their foreheads together instead of kiss. I'm like, if I never see that again, it's going to be too soon.
One thing I wanted to say, there are so many stories in this. This could have easily been a TV show.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
I would have loved to seen a series with this for sure. Yeah, I mean, the way that each character is interesting, from Wow Platinum to even Claudio, to even Lawrence Fishburne's character, who is the driver for Caesar. He's an interesting driver's driver. He's an interesting character. There's so many interesting characters that seem to have their own story as well, that we don't see. We just see who they are. That, the minute I was watching it, I'm like, man, this would have been an interesting series to really explore this world that he has, because not only do we have all these other elements, let's not forget, we got Dustin Hoffman as a heavy in here, as a gangster heavy in here, with this whole story of the possible underworld still existing, the criminal underworld, but that's just hinted at in here. There is a lot to take in, that you're there for a short amount of time with, in some respects, and maybe that's it. There's just so much to take in, and so much you're presented with, and you got to really pay attention. That even at the end, you're like, I'm missing some of the plots in here. What about this or this and this? Where'd this go?
Right, but I think there's a key difference between feeling at the end like you've been cheated, like it's convoluted to patch over sloppiness, and you feeling like I might need to either think on this a lot or go see it again, maybe a couple of times, to fully appreciate everything that's going on, because it is a lot kind of thrown at you, which is why I'm puzzled by, I've seen a lot of critics. I mean, I'm sad to say, Sergio, this is the second time this week I'm crapping on people in my profession in talking with you. But I'll just say a common line I've seen among my colleagues is like, oh, it took me a week to finally write my Megalopolis review. I don't understand. I'm like, that's BS. I mean, if that's true, then you're bad at your job. But also, I feel like you're being deliberately kind of obtuse, because it's not like it's not like Romeo and Juliet from Baz Luhrmann, where it is literally contemporary visuals and everybody is speaking in the classic Shakespeare. You're like, wait, I never read this play and I don't understand half of what they're saying. No, everything in Megalopolis is laid out if you deliberately get on its wavelength and take the ride. If you're sitting there saying, I heard this sucked, I heard it's cost a lot of money, it's going to lose a lot of money, and that's humorless, and I hear it's going to be nominated for a whole bunch of Razzies, and man, this must be terrible, then you're not going to allow yourself to even come close to getting it, and it's disappointing.
The problem a lot of people have with the movie is the form, right? We're not used to this form. It's like someone who's never watched a David Lynch movie, one of his classic movies, like maybe Inland Empire, and watching it for the first time and saying, "Oh, this is not similar to what I'm used to." It's just a different thing. It's art.
No,
it's definitely art. You have to take a look at it. You learn its language and then try to understand it.
So, Gio, I thought I told you this after we discussed Inland Empire. I never want that phrase can never be uttered on this show again.
Which was that? What is that?
Inland Empire. I appreciate. Okay, I take the point that if you haven't watched movies like or in the vein of Inland Empire, you're probably not going to get Megalopolis. But Inland Empire is not the point of comparison I would start with, because this is a good, watchable, and reasonably lengthed runtime.
For what it is,
Inland Empire is not.
Yeah,
Inland Empire has a lot of fans also, critics who are fans.
When you say a lot, I mean, you could say that 50 is a lot of people. You're talking about in your house, but
let me take a look. Inland Empire, Rotten Tomatoes.
Endless Empire. It probably still, let me guess, it still has a much higher rating than Megalopolis.
72% for critics.
How much?
72%
How much?
for critics.
Oh, there you go. That's not bad.
That's not bad.
Yeah. No, but hold on.
See
Exhibit A and B of what I've said about critics this week, and yeah, I'm going to come up with a different name for what we do, because I need to move myself away.
And again, I honestly think the big hook is one, you've got Coppola's name on it. It had this odd press coming up to it, and then it's an odd film not everyone can take. Throw Neon name in front of this, or A24, and give
not
it
Lionsgate.
No, not Lionsgate. But if you throw the Neon studio logo before this, or A24, and rename the director something else, I honestly think it gets accepted at least a little bit differently than the fact that you have the pedigree you do behind this. And whether or not it's consciously or subconsciously, people will bring that in with them, expecting a specific film, to where when they don't get that, it can be jarring for folks. Rather than taking the body of work by itself, you're carrying that baggage, whether or not it's intentional or you don't realize it. You're going to have that in here. So, if this was his first film, people would be like, okay, I like what I see here. I'd like to see him do something else, but I'm kind of digging it. But this isn't his first film. This could be one of his swan song films. Hopefully not. But, so people are like, wait, he did this?
Well, no, it's interesting, Mark, because there is the kind of the curse of the director brand. I mean, it works the other way too, where you've got someone like Scorsese. He comes out with a new movie and it's like, oh my God, it's amazing. You have to go see it. And I'm like, yeah, but I mean, The Irishman. But okay, I want to pull over for a second. I think what we have here is what I'm going to call an incomplete comment. So, because Not My Real Name says Inland Empire is very rewarding with repeated viewings, but he left off the on mushrooms part. Very disappointing. Not My Real Name.
And about the release, if this was released like a Godard movie, which is an art house release, $4 million is great.
Yeah.
When it's released like a wide release, semi-wide release, 1,700 theaters, Coppola's name, similar to what Mark was saying, people and Roman type adventure, ancient Roman type, people were expecting something different. So the marketing should have been like, listen, this is Coppola's art house movie. Don't go to it if you're expecting The Godfather. This is
No.
something entirely different. It's an art house movie, etc., etc.
It should have
Yeah.
been it should have been toured, and it was to a couple fests, but to the big fest, just toured to the big fest, all the like Sundance, TIFF, all of those, play at those, then go on a Alamo Draft House tour of sorts and just get released, like you said, Sajiwa, to the smaller single screen or indie type theaters.
An art house platform release.
Yeah, an art type for where you're going to get people who go to those films with a little bit different expectation than your wide release, and so you make it tour that for a while, and it makes some money. Say it's make $4 or $8 million, whatever. You'll probably make more that way going to those smaller releases, and then it hits streaming. $20 for streaming, and then people could see it, and by then you've built up at least a buzz or audience of some people going, it's not that bad, and there's this and this and this, and you create a little bit. But by doing it like a mass summer movie, I think maybe was a bit of a mistake, because it's not as playful as Everything Everywhere All at Once, so you could sell the art house angle, the way it is. That film really got over with audiences because it's quirky. It's great. Don't get me wrong. It's a great indie release. I am very happy people discovered that film. But yeah, this film just has so much baggage with it that I think it's what's hurting it in the end, because it's watchable. It's definitely watchable. If nothing else, this isn't like a film that you're going like, oh my God, I want to claw my eyes out.
Oh yeah, I mean, I think watchable is. I would not use that word to describe this movie, because yes, you can watch it and really enjoy it, but watchable is kind of like a comment that we're going to see coming up here in a second. It's like something you put on, like, oh, yeah, I can watch it, but this kind of gets back to what we opened the discussion with, unfortunately, the kind of the discussion of money, because I agree. I think if this had
one quick thing, guess how much Inland Empire made theatrically?
$4 million.
$4 million.
$4 million. But how much did it cost to make? I mean, like
$2 million.
Yeah. So, but I mean,
Coppola thought he had a mainstream movie, or for some reason, maybe to go back to the old timey hits, he wanted to release it mainstream. I think a lot of distributors wanted to do our art house release, and Coppola was against it.
Well, I was just going to say, I think I understand that, because again, if you've spent $120 million to make the movie, you're going to want to give it as much of a chance to succeed as possible. And even just, the biggest indie art house success, unless you're talking about something that really is going to perhaps break out of that and draw in a more mainstream audience. So you might start an art house theater and then get like into AMC's later. That's a very rare kind of Cinderella story. You got to go, where the money is possibly at, which is, I went to see this at an AMC. It had no business being there, but I think the people who were making the calculations were like, we have a lot of money to recoup. We need to give it a chance to succeed. So let's pull over again, because this is an interesting comment here. Eddie G. World says, all movie creators pale compared to Jodorowsky. Now, I can't comment on that, because I've only seen the documentary Jodorowsky's Dune, which I think is great, and it is about his failed attempt to make to adapt Frank Herbert's Dune, the novel, back in the 70s, I think it was. And David Lynch famously made his version, and then Denis Villeneuve made his version. There was a couple like TV versions in between. But the documentary, if you haven't seen it, I really recommend it, because the director Jodorowsky is crazy in all the best ways. And there's this film Bible that he compiled over the years of making this movie that I think someone actually put out a commercial version of it, but it was like something ridiculous, like $500. It's a real art object, but you get to see the creative process and everything that goes into a movie that ultimately never came out. And by the end of that documentary, you're like, damn it, can I visit the parallel universe? Maybe a machine built on Megalon to be able to go to a cinema and watch Jodorowsky's Dune. Okay.
I went to see one of Jodorowsky's movies recently, and from the 70s, I think. I forget the Holy Mountain. It might have been the Holy Mountain. Anyway, I think compared to Megalopolis, Megalopolis is a lot better as a regular movie compared to something like the Holy Mountain.
Well, yeah, and I get that impression that, you know, watching Jodorowsky's Dune, that his version would have been way more impressionistic, partially because he admits that he never read the book and never had any interest in reading the source material. He just kind of wanted to make his own kind of a vibe film. So I can definitely understand that. But yeah, that's a great point, Eddie G. I need to bone up on my Jodorowsky. Okay, not my real name is back. He says it was Okay, here's exactly. It was torture watching at the cinema, but it's probably my favorite DVD to fall asleep to nowadays. It's kind of hypnotizing.
It's probably about Inland Empire, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. Inland. So I agree. It is the perfect movie to fall asleep to. Fire in. I like this. Fire in the Sky. Megalopolis is a masterpiece. The first film to capture the pending collapse in the post-human TikTok age. You know, masterpiece is a strong word.
New York is much better right now. So,
actual New York.
So the New York Rome thing that they have in the movie, that's not the real New York. So
but it's not supposed to be. It's allegorical. It's the I love that Coppola turned a cliche into a damn good movie. The whole thing of like, oh, modern civilization, the modern West is just like fiddling while Rome is burning. I guarantee that was the genesis of this movie, this concept. I know he started writing it 40 years ago, but that idea has also been around with us for a while. The idea of decadence and depravity and love of money above all else, the disintegration of the family and the death of love. I think this movie is his attempt to kind of combat that through art, and I'm there for it. Fire in the Sky also says Megalopolis is intentionally fragmented, hyper-edited, bombastic, even cartoonish, because it's reflecting the sheer banality and spectacle of our dying civilization.
But it's not a civilization at all. It's like one of the best and doing really well.
Mm-hmm.
I think he's talking specifically like culturally, which I can.
Even culturally, it's not. We have so much variety of culture happening. I mean, if you're talking about or families or people getting better health care. I mean, this is every country and every age has this paranoid delusion that they're living in, that it's falling apart. I mean, sometimes it's correct, but this.
Well, and I think that's what Fire in the Sky is referring to. I think that is rightly or wrongly, and I happen to agree with this sentiment. I don't know that we're dying, but I think we're headed in a very dangerous and dark direction. How many D's can I get in there? Decadent.
I think it's paranoia. I think that's just paranoia. That's not the actual situation.
Well, I would vehemently disagree, and I think that's a separate conversation. Sure. But Coppola is reacting to something that I think a lot of people are responding to who have seen the movie and are taking that interpretation away from it. But yeah, and that's one of the other great things about Megalopolis, I think, is it opens up the room for this type of discussion. Not my real name, again, says the potholes. I assume you mean plot holes or potholes because it's New York. Regarding time stopping and things like that, like the satellite blowing up for no real purpose, were ludicrous, but I end up enjoying the absurdity of it all. Okay. I agree. I don't know. I still don't know exactly what the time stopping thing was, except for maybe some of the ideas we touched on earlier in the show. But it was interesting to look at, and especially that little tag at the end. I kind of saw it coming, but it was sweet. Fire in the Sky says there is not a single metric, not one, by which to judge societal health that's not a bad omen. I can list them out for the silly dude. Here goes. I don't know who's the silly dude.
Like the world right now is worse than 1930s. I don't think so.
Well, it all depends on what you're talking about. I mean, if you're talking about
World War II, so this is a much better world.
Well, I'm saying in some regards, yes. In some regards, no.
In a big way, like 60 million people died, right, in World War II.
I'm not just talking about like death and famine. I'm talking about things like, and I had this discussion earlier this afternoon talking about the movie Crumb from 1994,
Mhm.
looking at, attitudes about, sex and, propriety and things like that. The idea that you would go from, the idea of, let's call it, I want to say women's liberation, but respect for women, um, going from I didn't expect to have this conversation tonight, but the idea of respect for one's body, respect for sex and relationships and all that stuff, to a society now where complete debauchery and deviance is
Yeah,
celebrated and put up
there's
on a pedestal.
some made up thing.
It is not OnlyFans. That's all I have to say. I have two words: OnlyFans.
But
That is
porn has
marker
always
number
been
one.
porn has always
That
been with us.
that is the next level, up
Yeah,
or
the
down, depending on your
yeah.
point of view.
I mean, this is the tech-enabled thing. I mean, OnlyFans. Listen, if people hate OnlyFans, it can be banned. People don't hate it enough to ban it.
Right, but I think that speaks to what we're kind of talking about as far as decadence. You give people a lot of what they want, but they don't know always necessarily. I mean, you could give someone heroin and say, "Yeah, this is great. I never want to stop doing this. Is it good for you? No."
No, no, no.
Here's the thing is that the part of this issue is acting as if these things that are now up front and in the public eye have never been around. In the 50s, you had debauchery, you had all these things, you had similar, but it was more hush, it was more underground, it was more not brought to the forefront, but it's always been there. To think that these elements that some people are saying this is the fall of, civilization and this, and we're glorifying this, it's in the forefront, but it's always been there. It's just that during a certain time period, it was definitely considered taboo to talk about it in public. And so therefore it was put under the rug. It was put in secret. People didn't come out to who they really are, because if they did,
there's a key difference though. In the 1950s, we didn't have the internet. We didn't have the ability to broadcast ourselves to people all over the world, right? And to get these in one sense, and I think this was the kind of the genie out of the bottle thing of, people said with the advent of the internet, people are going to have, the library at Alexandria in their pocket. Is going to make us all more interesting and smarter and great. And it has, in some cases, done that. It's unleashed a lot of creativity and brought a lot of people together, but has also allowed us to indulge in our basest, darkest instincts. And sort of, I kind of equate it to, you'd go to the store back in the 1980s and people were dressed like they were getting up and going out of the house to go grocery shopping. And now you've got people wearing like flip-flops and pajama bottoms down around their ankles and like tank tops with their boobs hanging out. It's like there is just something widespread that I don't think is necessarily healthy. And again, I don't want to get into a whole thing more than we already have, because that's a whole other show that's outside the context of a movie podcast. But I feel like what's in Megalopolis is Coppola reacting to that, what he sees as a cultural debauchery and a backward slide that can be fought back against if people literally stop time and say, I'm going to, it's like the old thing about can Republicans stand athwart the progress of time and say stop, or something like that. But the idea of taking a break, remembering our potential and what we want to achieve, and saying there's a better way to do this than, sleeping your way to the top. And I mean, that whole thing with Wow. I keep remembering, what is her last name?
Platinum.
Wow Platinum. I want to say Wow Performer, but no. When she and Shia LaBeouf are having their very awkward, very strange, animalistic, sexual escapade towards the end of the movie, I didn't quite know what I was watching, except a complete freak show, because that's what these people were, because they allowed themselves to get completely wrapped up in these superficial ideas that have nothing to do with humanity and all about materialism. And I feel like that is the ultimate message of the movie is that's not healthy. We've got to, be better, listen to our better angels and try and make the world a better place for everybody and not just indulge in our own kind of selfish, hedonism.
All right. Well,
But
1940s we had colonialism. 200 years ago we had slavery. So right now we have,
right, but Cesar, you're. I don't know if you're deliberately missing my point. I'm saying that we have gotten better in a lot of ways, but in a lot of ways we have taken significant steps. I don't know, backwards or sideways, but something is not good here.
A little bit.
But here, the difference with what Coppola is saying in Megalopolis and what we're seeing right now is that Caesar was not vilifying those for those exact points that you're talking about. He was just trying to make the world a better place. And right now,
he wasn't vilifying it in a direct fashion. He was standing against the casino because the mayor's idea for how to help the people, how to raise money for the downtrodden was, let's open a casino in the middle of the city. And Caesar was like, well, what if we just built a better city?
Right. But he still wasn't vilifying it. He was giving an option to it. The issue that you have here in reality versus Megalopolis is so much vilification for things rather than understanding and having a cordial discussion of between ideas and things. And we even see that here in Megalopolis, that it pretty much takes it takes Caesar getting having the relationship and in secret marrying Julia and them having a baby to start to make is it Cicero Cicero look at things a little bit differently, and eventually they kind of have a discussion and they come around, but at first, especially from the Cicero side, they're so at odds because they're on opposite ends of the philosophical spectrum and the way they approach things that they aren't listening to each other. We get it. The perfect example is them, as you mentioned, Ian, when we're first introduced to Caesar and Cicero and their interaction with one another, they're butting heads. Caesar comes out and makes a spectacle to overshadow Cicero's spectacle in a way, with him quoting and being very dramatic with his Shakespeare in that, rather than, them sitting down going, okay, yeah, you got a casino. Here's a better way to build this. And here's what this is going to improve. At least have an exchange of ideas. They don't get that for most of the film, but when they eventually do at some point, whether or not the motivation of Cicero was great by saying, here, I've got this letter, I'm giving in, here you go kind of thing. Until they kind of once they see eye to eye, and he hasn't completely changed Cicero and Cicero hasn't completely changed Caesar, but they see more where they're coming from. Suddenly we get that utopia. We get the what Caesar was picturing, and we get them standing together on the edge where you can see old Rome, new Rome in the background, and you can see part of the new utopia in the forward of them, and they're all together. And I could be making a lake out of a puddle again, but where they're sitting, they finally come together and agree on some things, not everything, but they agree on some things enough to make it prosperous for everyone.
No, I think that's a good point. Sorry, go ahead. Cesar, go ahead.
So in the movie, not what people, a good fable, a good myth, people can project their own values onto it and see something reflected back. But in the movie, Caesar doesn't criticize the norms of their society. He's just focused on using Megalon to build a new city. He's not.
No, he does criticize them, because one thing I was going to point out to Mark is he doesn't showboat in terms of like going out and saying, you people are all crooked and dumb. But in his first interaction with Julia in the office, he does dismiss her as being the son of the mayor, or the daughter of the mayor, and kind of vapid.
He's not saying that this Rome, the excessive ancient Rome inspired culture that some people practice in the movie is a bad thing. He never says that in the movie.
Well, he doesn't need to, because he's ascribing the values that he thinks that her father has to her based on the performance that he's seen of her in the media, because she is a public media figure, much like that pop star.
Yeah, so
Now,
maybe
the fact that they have, well, the fact that they do eventually come together and have those same kind of civil conversations. I mean, Julia is the bridge, not exactly between generations, because Adam Driver is much closer in age than, you know, her father Cicero, but I think that parallel is kind of mirrored later on when Caesar and Julia do have their own kid as a literal kind of bridge into the future that also helps to bring those two, you know, previously, you know, warring families together, because there's some downright touching stuff at the end where Cicero's wife is getting onto that little kind of floating lake
the water
bridge treadmill, whatever thing going into the city. And she's like, just come on, just get on this thing with me. And he's like the stubborn old guy. He's like, fine, yes, dear. It's endearing. It's a classic kind of sitcom trope, but it's also, you know, kind of sweet. Now,
escalators are the future.
Escalator. There you go. That's the name of this. That's a new meme, a Megalopolis meme. All right. Well, we are gonna leave it there, gang. We got some interesting comments on this side, but I'll just leave those there. I don't know what you think 1 year of medical school entitles you to plow through the riches of my Emersonian mind, by Mike Eisenhower. What does this mean, Mike Eisenhower? And why did you post this like
I think it's a quote.
3
That's
times?
a quote from the movie.
It's a quote from the movie.
I don't remember it. I mean, there's so much stuff in here. Kudos to you guys for picking that up.
Yeah, I picked up on that right away, because that's around the same time where he goes, go back to the club.
Yeah. His first interaction with Julia.
His first interaction.
Oh, that's right. Okay. Yeah. So anyway, and yes, Mike chimes in. It is a line from the movie. Okay. So
and one thing I want to add, one thing that there's some debate over what the movie means is it's vague. It's not a mainstream, well-written script that spells out what it's trying to say. So this is the problem we have.
Well, I mean, that's that, but again, that's the thing with I don't know how many regular moviegoers have bothered to watch this. So most of the conversation I've seen has come from critics, and I don't know, again, how you can call yourself a film critic, how you can watch this movie and come out saying it doesn't make any sense, it's poorly written, it's not perfectly written, it is open to interpretation. But I have no doubt that Coppola knew what he was doing, what he was trying to say. And there's almost like this, if I didn't get it the first time, then it's terrible. I mean, I've been guilty of that myself, but I feel like if you watch this movie again, there should be no questions at the end of it. And you know, you can bring your own meaning to it, but you can't just say it's bad because it doesn't make any sense. It does make sense if you allow it yourself to understand it.
Yeah, it takes a lot of work. It's because the form is unusual. This is the problem that a lot of people have with it.
And Eddie's right. That's the other tone that I forget. And the other person in the room while they're dropping acid, David Lynch, Snyder, you know, Terrence Malick and Shakespeare are all dropping acid writing this, because this had a very Shakespearean feel to it. It had almost a Shakespearean play type feel to it. The kind of that structure of Hamlet and the others, to where it's not necessarily a straight A to B to C narrative so much as scenes and chapters and moments where we're seeing our characters in time at the pivotal plot points or whatever, or even not so pivotal. But
I mean, it's like it's like a typical late period Godard movie. Philosophy, some scenes, some other stuff, some, you know, meaning of the world. I mean, actual quote from one of a trailer for a Godard movie, Goodbye to Language, is two people talking, and one goes, you know, something like, he made us ashamed because he couldn't make us perfect, and the other person's like, who? And the first person's like, God. So it's that level, extremely, what is the total meaning of the world? What should we do? Kind of, you know, really high level questions.
Yeah, and I'll take that over, you know, again, most of the movies I paid to see in a theater in the last 6 months, certainly. Eddie G, I'm going to end with this quote or this comment, because I think it's a good one. I don't necessarily agree with it, but I think it's on the right wavelength. Unless one is well versed in Shakespeare and Greek and Roman works, you will not fully grasp Megalopolis. I feel like if you are, then you'll get a lot more out of it. But even if you're not, I mean, if you're aware that Shakespeare existed and Greek and Roman works are a thing, that might help for you to navigate some of the waters where all of a sudden they're not speaking like, regular futuristic New Yorkers.
Mhm.
But
And
I think you can appreciate this without having read all of the classic works. But if you're educated in that way, there's a lot here for you.
maybe this will be the start of a new genre, the Megalopolis genre of movies. And Ian, you will probably enjoy that.
I shall, but I guarantee they're not going to have nearly as high the production values. But anyway, guys, we're going to leave it here. But I really, this has been a really fun discussion, a little contentious, but I love it. And I really appreciate all the folks piling in here to open up the discussion on the side. We didn't get through all the comments, but I certainly appreciate it. And yeah, folks out there, if you haven't seen Megalopolis, if the 17 days to streaming rule holds true, you'll be able to watch it very soon. But I do recommend, give it a chance. Go to like a $6 Tuesday. I guarantee you're going to feel something coming out of this movie, even if it's rage. But anyway, tonight I have been Ian Simmons of Kicking the Seat. We have Sejua Ekanayaka he's the NYC extraordinaire filmmaker, maker of Werewolf Ninja Philosopher. Oh my gosh. Cosmic Disco Detective Renee, the upcoming 53 Spaceships. We've got Mark the Movie Man Krawcheck of the Spoiler Room podcast and Special Mark Productions. Thanks, guys, for hanging out and talking about this movie. Folks out there, what did you think of Megalopolis if you saw it? Leave a comment below, and maybe we'll talk about that on a future podcast. If you like this show, please like, subscribe, and all that good stuff. Please check out all of Earth's Mightiest critics. All their information is below. Even if they couldn't all be here tonight, it kind of worked out because this has been a really robust, kind of intimate discussion. I dig it. So thanks, everybody. Take care and join us back next week right here. We're going to be talking about another equally great and amazing, groundbreaking film, Joker, Folly Ado. And yeah,
I think all of us enjoyed Megalopolis to a certain degree, but we had different takes on it, so that was good.
Yes.
And that's the whole point of the film.
That's right.
Yes. Oh, but here's our real closer. Not My Real Name says, great chat. Glad YouTube just suggested you subbed. Thank you very much, sir.
Congrats.
Or sir or ma'am. I don't know. Not sure who you are, but all right, cool. Good night, everybody. And
Megalon,
we'll catch you later.
Megalon.
Megalon forever.